Still winging it. So I've got a new guest on this time around. A guy called Jayson Holechek. He's just moved to Bangkok from Phuket, where he was training and working. So I just want to ask, I mean, where do we start? I mean, you're helping out with the nogi program at Açaí right now, and you have some pretty awesome brands under your belt. So let's start. Just yeah, how did you get started?
How did I get started doing jiu-jitsu?
Jiu-jitsu, yeah. Let's start with that.
Well, I started wrestling at a real young age. So I started initially when I was like 5 years old. My grandpa was a big wrestling coach in the state of Nebraska. And my father had wrestled a bit too. So I started wrestling when I was real young, big appreciation for that sport. And then took several years off, started again in high school. Ended up doing it in university at like smaller schools. So like a junior college called Iowa Western, and then another university called Midland University. And so I wrestled, and then after I graduated university, I worked for a couple years, and just kind of like felt like I needed that like team atmosphere and camaraderie again. And jiu-jitsu just kind of felt like the natural next progression after wrestling. You know, there's not really like adult wrestling clubs. Like they exist, but they're for the elite that have like Olympic dreams or international competition, right? So like jiu-jitsu is just much more accessible. So I started doing that initially just because of my work schedule. It was a couple times a week, and then I ended up quitting my job that I had in America, selling everything I owned, and moving to Asia with just a backpack. And I started in Vietnam, and that's when I started really training like every day.
Where were you training in Vietnam?
It was Saigon Lutte de Livre.
Oh, I've heard good things about them, yeah.
So at the time, it was a guy named Eric Khine, who's actually moved back to California since then. But I think that club still exists. And I think like in Saigon, in Ho Chi Minh City, it sounds like jiu-jitsu's thriving. Like
it's thriving now. Actually, there's been job offers going on with Saigon Sports Club. They're opening up a second gym in District 2, from what I understand. It's like a super mega facility. So they're looking for coaches, sales managers, marketing managers, etc. Right now, it's pretty crazy. Another friend of mine that used to train in Saigon Jiu-Jitsu, he's opened up his own gym called Jiujiteros. Yeah, shout out to the shirt, by the way, because this is his brand, Gis in Saigon.
Autumn Rolls, it's called.
So it's every season shirt. It's pretty awesome. One of my students, Max, went to Vietnam for a trip, and he brought back some shirts and rash guards and stuff like that for me.
That's a great gift.
Yeah, really awesome. Yeah. So where in the U.S. did you actually start jiu-jitsu?
Well, I was living in Kansas City, Missouri at the time, and so I started, and it was like literally once or twice a week. So I don't even remember. It might have been called Glory, but I was there for a couple months, going like once or twice a week even. So they probably wouldn't even remember me.
What prompted you to come to Asia? I mean, Vietnam's a great choice, but what was it?
So like right after university, like I got what most people would consider like a dream job. Like I was making six figures right out the gate, wearing like suit and tie to work every day, like fancy title. I was a district manager for like a large automotive finance and insurance company. But like I felt like I was gonna like blow my brains out. Like it was like 60-hour weeks, and just like the existential dread of like, I'm gonna do this for 50 years or 40 years, hopefully retire if I even can, and then die. Like 2 weeks of vacation a year, and I was kind of miserable. So I'd been like watching some YouTube channels and stuff, and like just seeing about like Vietnam, and it just looked like a really cool place to travel, low cost of living. Like I saw you could get a bed for $5 a night. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna, like, this isn't the answer. So I'll go there. And just like kind of like bide my time somewhere until I figure out what I actually want to do with my life. And then when I got there, I found like a teaching job. So they said, hey, like you have a bachelor's degree, speak English, you can find a teaching job. So I started doing that, and it wasn't bad. So that was like, okay, this is something I could make a career out of. Like, I don't hate it. I don't feel like I'm going to flip the desk over every day, and good work-life balance. So I started, I got like my teaching license, and then I started working on my master's degree in education eventually. And so next place after Vietnam was China, where I spent like the better part of like 4 years.
Whereabouts were you based in China?
First place I was in was Beijing for about 2 years. And then from Beijing, I went to Chengdu. And then Chengdu, the next place I was at for like the long term was Shanghai.
Which of those three cities did you enjoy the most?
You know, I thoroughly enjoyed all of them. Like they all like are very, very different. Like Beijing is huge, and it's international, but it's also like very Chinese. Like it's like the home of the government. Like the Communist Party runs all their operations there, and it's a little more of a concrete jungle. But like I still enjoyed it. Like it's like there's 30 million people, and it's like a real city of the world. So like any night, you like whatever you're looking for, you can find it, right? Like if you want to go salsa dancing, you can go salsa dancing. If you want to have sushi, you can have sushi. Like there's Koreatown, there's like there's just it's very
Everything and anything, basically. Yeah.
And then Chengdu might have been my favorite. It's in Sichuan, so they have like their own cuisine, which is just like very spicy food. And then they've got the bamboo forests, pandas, and it's like when you picture China, like you probably picture Sichuan.
Yeah.
And then Shanghai is like the most international. Like,
yeah, so I hear, yeah.
Yeah. It's really cool. There's like I lived in an area called the French Concession, which was like an old French colony.
Oh,
and
wow.
so it's got like that French architecture, and there's like willow trees hanging over the streets and cobblestone roads and everything. And it's a nice place to live.
So how was the jiu-jitsu scene there when you started living there?
Jiu-jitsu's booming in China.
Yeah, so I hear, but you don't really hear much about it.
Yeah, you hear a little bit. Like there's some athletes coming out of there. Like some of them have been competing here in Thailand, and then like I think the big one to come out of China is like Joseph.
Yeah,
is killing it on like the world stage and stuff.
Is he in 20 yet? He might be, right?
I think he's probably 18.
Yeah. And I see him traveling around like Taipei. He's going around Vietnam doing little seminars here and there. I mean, my friend Anthony, he owns a gym over there called Jozu, and he was just telling, well, they just moved to a bigger location, and he said like he doesn't really care much about the money that much, but he just really loves teaching as well, which is a really good combination, especially at that young an age as well. Yeah. So yeah. Oh no, go ahead. Yeah,
I was gonna say like in the tier 1 cities, so like cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, like Shenzhen, like it's just exploding because number one, China's economy is growing so fast that people have more disposable income to like do things like put their kids in sports, right? Like you'll see like hockey teams are popping up everywhere, like American football is popping up everywhere, and jiu-jitsu is getting really popular too because people have more time and money for stuff like that. Also, like as the economy gets stronger, you have so like it's very cost effective for them to like import like Brazilian black belts to come teach jiu-jitsu because the wages aren't very high in Brazil, and China's got a lot more expendable income. So like almost every gym there will have at least one Brazilian black belt teaching jiu-jitsu. So like Beijing, probably 30, 40 jiu-jitsu gyms.
Wow. So yeah, like before I even knew it, like about the Chinese scene, because I mean, obviously their social media is different, right? They don't use Facebook or Instagram really that much. But what I found was before I knew it, my friend showed me a map, and there's like 8 alliance, like associations dotted all around China. And my friend's got like an AOJ affiliate in Kunming as well, and he just loved jiu-jitsu. And then he came on holiday, and before you know it, he's a black belt teaching out there as well. And the competition scene there's like massive apparently as well.
Is that how you say it? Alliance?
Alliance, yeah, that's how they pronounce it.
Alliance.
Yeah, well, it is alliance, I suppose, but then they call it, I think the Brazilians or the Portuguese call it Alliance, yeah. It's a cool pronunciation.
It's not a triangle, it's a senkaku.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, go ahead. No, all right. So Beijing, Chengdu, and then Shanghai. So obviously Shanghai probably has like a lot more like international friendly jiu-jitsu scene there. But like, out of those three cities, I mean, where did you train?
When I was in Beijing, I was at Gracie Baja, Xunyi, which is like, it's like in a suburb of Beijing. And Pedro Jordao is the coach, really accomplished Brazilian black belt, like Euros medalist, won a lot of local tournaments too, and like national tournaments around Brazil. He's placed in very highly as well. Zhong Wei Li, the UFC former UFC champion, she was actually training there too. So it was like it was a pretty good environment to train. It was super gi heavy. So we did gi Monday through Friday, and then your only option was once a week on Saturday afternoon for no gi.
Kind of similar to Arete as well, back in the old gyms as well. I think it was like every Friday was the only time we had no gi. Luckily, it's changed a little bit.
Yeah. And then after Beijing, I went to Chengdu, BJJ, for a year. And then in Shanghai, I was like, I bounced around between a few. Like there were enough gyms that I'd try to go to like 4 or 5 in a week, right? So Absolute MMA Shanghai, Bushido was another really good one.
Yeah.
There's a cool one called Ocean.
I think the Absolutes is turned into Method now, I think, right? I think it's called Method.
Yeah, I think they've rebranded. Also, another great one I want to give a shout out to is, so there's an island off the coast of China called Hainan.
Okay.
And there's a city called Haikou, and there's a guy named Tim that runs Anchor BJJ, and it's one of the coolest clubs I've ever been to too. Yeah.
What's so cool about it?
I really like the atmosphere he's created there. He's just like a really friendly guy, like really fatherly, and he's just like really created something great. And it's probably one of the less international cities in China too. So they've got like a lot of locals there, and just like really cultivating jiu-jitsu in a place that didn't have it before.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of Tim. He's been involved in jiu-jitsu for a long time too. He's a great referee, great coach. He lived in Brazil, got his black belt in Brazil, speaks Portuguese perfectly too.
Wow. Man. So what was after China?
After China, I went home for a couple months to kind of figure out what I was doing in my life. And while I'd been living in China, I bought like a condo in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. So I left China, went back to America for a couple months, and then I went to Cambodia to try to like sell that condo.
And that's where you're kind of like training at Kiri Jiu-Jitsu, right?
Yeah, I was at Kiri for about 6 months.
How'd you like the scene over there?
It's cool. Jasper has like really built something great in Cambodia. It's they've got like a really fun atmosphere. Like it's very social. People train together every Friday. They order pizza to the gym and just sit on the mat and eat it and kind of listen to music and have a few beers. It's really like the atmosphere there is really cool. It's like a really like aesthetic gym. Like they have sweet Fuji mats, and then they've got like this giant mural on the wall. It's a nice place to train.
Yeah, I heard really good things. They all send me like free T-shirts as well, which I'm really thankful for. I really do love them. It's almost like it seems so busy. It's almost like they've outgrown that space now, right?
Yeah, possibly. Like they could probably do with a second one.
So what was after Phnom Penh, Cambodia?
After Phnom Penh, I moved to Phuket, and I went there with like the explicit purpose of training at Phuket Grappling Academy.
I've heard really good things about that place.
Yeah.
Were you there when they only had that small space initially?
Yeah, I was there for the Blue Room for about 6 months.
Yeah, that place looked really brutal.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was kind of fun. Too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bigger space is definitely a little better. You can let it fly a little more. Like in the Blue Room, like you have to stop to readjust, right? Like you might not be able to hit whatever pass you want because there's another group 6 inches away from you.
So they've moved to the new space now, and you were. So how many months were you in that little blue room, and then how many months were you in the big space?
I was only there for 6 months. I think
okay.
they were there for a year and a half. I think.
It sounds like Ben Royal did the right thing. I mean, he started really small, and then he kind of outgrew that space, and then they managed to luck out in that huge, massive facility now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he did a really good job of building something great there. I think his goal was he wanted, from my understanding, he wanted to give the kids a place to train when one of the other gyms was having some troubles during COVID or whatever. He wanted to make sure the kids had a place to train. And then also he'd just have a place to spar with some partners.
Yeah.
And then I think it just grew and grew to the point where it warranted the larger facility. And I think it was like right time and place, like a really like perfect building for it.
Yeah.
Came up for rent, like probably 200 meters away from where the last gym was. So.
Man. So basically, you end up in Vietnam, you end up traveling through some of the major cities in China, you end up in Cambodia, then you're in Thailand, man. Like, where does the jiu-jitsu brands fit in? Because I mean, I've got a rash guard from you from Lucha, which is awesome, but I had no idea that you were actually like the guy who created Iron BJJ as well.
So while I was working full-time in China, I knew whatever my life looked like I wanted jiu-jitsu to be a large part of it. Like in a perfect world, I'd just be able to train every day.
Yeah.
And just kind of build my life around that. So I started playing around with like e-commerce and just like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. So like the first thing I did was when I was learning to read Chinese, I'd make myself these flashcards that would have like the character on one side and then like the pinyin in English on the other. And that looked really well, like that worked really well for me. And I saw on Amazon nobody else was doing it. So I called up like a factory that makes playing cards, and I had them basically recreate what I had already been doing for myself and buy like 1,000 decks of like flashcards like that. And then I ended up selling those on Amazon and had a little bit of luck. And so I was like, okay, so it wasn't a lot, but I was like making a few $100s a month from that, like enough to cover my student loan payments and stuff. So I was like, all right, what's the next product? So I started playing with rash guards next. So I chose the name Iron. Like I just wanted something short and like short, easy to remember. And I always liked, it's kind of like a cliche, but like the old adage, like iron sharpens iron. And so it was just kind of like an homage to that and something that I'd have a tagline for. So the original rash guard just said iron across it. And I had like a little logo on it that I made in like a logo generator. Like he just, and that, a lot of people bought it from me. Yeah. And I wasn't sure if it was because I made something like a good product or if people were just being my friend, like being a good friend and supporting it and stuff. And so I sold that one original rash guard, and then like following the news, there was like a couple like incidents with like police brutality and stuff. And like there was a lot of discussion like in the martial arts community about how like if these guys would train jiu-jitsu, like a lot of like like excessive force stuff could be avoided because they could just safely handle somebody. So I made like so the expectation was that more and more law enforcement was going to start training jiu-jitsu. And so I made just kind of like a pro law enforcement rash guard, like the thin blue line rash guard.
How did that go?
It went really well. So that was the first one I put on Amazon, and it started doing pretty well. And so I started making a little bit of that. And then one day I walked into like a jiu-jitsu club and I was wearing that. And some dude like looked at me and like scoffed and he was like, why don't you make a "Don't Tread on Me" rash guard next? Like saying it like arrogantly. And I was like, you know what?
That's a great idea.
That's a good idea. So I went and I did that like that afternoon, got started working on it.
Yeah.
And that was a hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks awesome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
So I started selling a bunch of those. And then so like we kind of just like accidentally found ourselves like in a little niche.
Yeah.
And so I was sitting with some other American friends and we were just like brainstorming what other ideas we could do in keeping with that pattern.
Yeah.
And like that's how we came up with the idea of the Sleepy Joe.
Yeah.
Because it was election season and we were like, how could we do like Trump and Biden doing jujitsu with each other? And we came up with the idea for that graphic and calling it the Sleepy Joe rash guard. And that one, like once that started running, I got to the point where I didn't really need to work a full-time job anymore. So riches are in the niches.
Yeah, 100%.
And so I just kind of found myself in that niche and did a couple other ones. And then although that niche was like what allowed me to make a living in it in the beginning, like it's also probably my main bottleneck in like growth and scaling is that like the political nature of it. So I've tried to move away from it a little bit recently and do some just more neutral stuff and kind of distance from that. But like the problem is that they still sell. So it's like I could take a chance on new designs and try to grow and try to move away from it. But I always know if I do a reprint of one of those original ones, they're going to sell. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah. But like with Iron BJJ, I mean, it wasn't supposed to be like distinctly American initially, right? But it kind of went that way.
Yeah, it went that way from like the second rash guard design.
That's definitely a good idea. I mean, and like where in Beijing, Chengdu, and like Shanghai did this idea just spring from? Which city was it?
I was staying in Shanghai at the time.
Right, and then just the idea came along. I mean, I know like China, from like most of the jiu-jitsu brands, especially like athletic wear, they tend to come, most of the rash guards get manufactured there now. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy how you managed to find all that, find a place to actually start manufacturing, coming out with the designs and stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, controversy sells. I mean, how's the feedback been overall?
Overall good. Like occasionally
you'll get a couple of comments.
Yeah, I'll get like a couple comments, but otherwise, like for the most part, people think it's funny. People like it, and people like the online world is kind of political, and like kind of like vicious, and people treat each other terribly. But face to face, especially particularly in a setting like a jiu-jitsu gym, people are pretty kind to each other. So they just like maybe they see it as a dumb joke or they think it's corny, but most people they get over it.
Yeah, I mean, man, when it comes to injuries in jiu-jitsu, though, it's very, very rarely one person with ill intention. It's like you zigged and the other person zagged, and then the accident happened usually. So it's like you can see it your way, you can see it the other way as well. Most injuries that I see are always accidental. As long as you put in good safety protocols in general, very few and far between.
Yeah, and I mean, Reddit is the most polarizing place on earth. And like, people kind of live in their own little fantasy land on there. But I mean, Spazzy white belts exist and stuff, and do injure people.
They've even got a competition now in Malaysia called Spaz Fest as well, just specifically for white belts. I mean, I think it's a great name as well.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that is pretty awesome.
Where's that at?
That's I think the combination was in KL, but like one of my friends owns a gym in Penang called Flow BJJ, and he was telling me about like the competition was great. He's got some kind of gigantic half Malaysian, half British, or half American arm wrestling champion. He started doing jiu-jitsu, and he ended up having like 15 matches that day, just beating everyone mercilessly. He's got a really nice gym there, so I mean, if anybody's got a chance to go to Flow BJJ in Penang, it's a great atmosphere.
How is the scene in Penang?
Penang, it's a quiet little town, but there's quite a few gyms there. From what I understand, there's 3 that I know of. The one I was visiting a few weeks ago or a month ago was Flow BJJ, run by a guy called Poppy. He's been a longtime friend of mine. It's a nice little white space. the theme, the artwork, everything is absolutely amazing, and just the atmosphere is amazing. I mean, they have quite a lot of turnaround of people coming in and out of the city. I wouldn't say, I would say a lot of teachers, international teachers are there, and it's a very, very peaceful place. But the training's really decent, and everyone's got a great attitude there as well. So I mean, if you're ever doing a little holiday, Flow BJJ would be a great place to go.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah. So, man. So in terms of competing and stuff like that, I mean, were you competing? Obviously, if you're wrestling, I mean, competition is a big part of it as well. In terms of competition in jiu-jitsu, for example, when did you start competing in jiu-jitsu?
I started competing when I was a white belt, living in China.
Is there a lot of competitions there?
Man, there's a ton of competition.
Really?
It's so big, and there's so many big cities that on almost any given weekend, there's a jiu-jitsu competition somewhere in the country.
Really?
Right? Which, like, interstate travel there is very easy because, like, they have such a nice, like, high-speed rail system.
Yeah.
And so, like, flights within the country, like, domestic flights are very cheap there, and traveling via high-speed rail is very cheap there. So, like, if you're a jiu-jitsu competitor there, it's pretty feasible to compete, like, all the time.
Yeah, I've got a friend, a Burmese friend in Germany as well, and like he goes to Amsterdam and stuff like that quite often. But like China, it seems like it's really easy to go from one place to one place. And I remember there's a guy in Japan who's, I think he's Japanese Brazilian, called Edison. He runs a competition called, or he owns a association called the ASJJF, for the Asian Jiu-Jitsu Federation, and he does competitions kind of like against the JBJJF, which is kind of like the Japanese IBJJF. So when they're running a competition, they'll run a competition somewhere else at a different place on the same day. I get what he's trying to do, but when he started doing competitions internationally, that's when he started to seem to have a lot of success. And it seems like, especially in China, when he's running competitions, they sell out really quickly, and they have to cap like registrations to 500 and stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah. So
it's cool to see the sport growing anywhere.
Yeah. It seems really popular. Just once people like get it, it seems to just like blow up from there.
Definitely.
Yeah. So you started a white belt. I mean, when do you think you actually started like really enjoying competing in jiu-jitsu? At what belt do you think?
I don't know that I ever really enjoy it.
Oh, really?
Like for me, like from the minute I sign up for a competition, like I just have like a heightened state of anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's kind of grim, but like my grandpa was refereeing a wrestling match where a kid got like paralyzed for life. And so whenever I have like an impending competition, like I think about that. Like,
oh, really?
What if that's me? Like, what if I get injured? Like, will I look back on it and think it was worth it, or will I have wished that I had never touched it? Like, so yeah, I don't enjoy competitions per se. It's just, I guess I do them sometimes because I feel like I should. And
yeah.
I mean, obviously winning feels nice, but I think everything else is kind of miserable.
It is a little bit. Yeah. It just depends on how you handle it. I mean, when I sign up as well, that's it. Like, let's say 4 weeks out, 6 weeks out, everything gets kind of serious, and you know, like what you need to be doing. And then you have that in the back of your mind always, even like the moment you pay the money for the registration all the way to the day of the competition, that's pretty much always going to be in the back of your mind.
Yeah. Like, I think it changes my whole demeanor.
Yeah.
Like, I get a little more like, just like a little more short, a little more irritable, and it just kind of like looms over you.
Yeah.
So I don't love it, but I do. Lately, like my attention is focused towards like some other stuff, like work related. But I'll probably get back to competing here soon.
So so you've actually just joined us at Arete, and you've been gracious enough to like impart some of your wisdom with wrestling and a little bit of jiu-jitsu, which I'm really thankful for.
Thanks.
Have you ever have you coached before you came to Arete? You've done a little bit, right?
Yeah, I never did it full time, but like when I was living in China, I coached a couple times a week in Chengdu, did some nogi and some wrestling, did a bit of nogi and wrestling at Khine in Cambodia too, and then doing the same here in Arete.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why I kind of earmarked you, was the fact that you had that wrestling background, and I just thought it'd be like major value added to the gym, just because it seems like wrestling's not that big a thing in Southeast Asia. It seems like
it's not huge.
Yeah, but it's like it's so important as well, right?
It is important. I mean, I think some people can and do find success without it. But yeah, it's a nice skill to have, just to be able to take down and avoid being taken down.
So in terms of coaching, you've had a little bit of experience dotted around here and there. I mean, in terms of like, what do you think, from what you've learned in wrestling and what you've done and what you've learned through different coaches all around China, Asia, America, what do you think is like the more effective way to teach or coach jiu-jitsu?
I think, I don't know. I think it's a blend of a few things. Like, I think people need to recognize that it's like an educational endeavor more than a physical endeavor. Like, it's a physical sport, but like more information is what makes you good. Like understanding and technique is what makes you good. So I think it's a blend of like being able to convey key information, repetition, so your body like has the muscle memory of what needs to be done, and then also the physical aspect. But I think if you do too much of any one, then it's going to be ineffective, right? So like there's a coach that talks for an hour, and then you don't retain any of it because you didn't actually do it. And then there's coaches that just do live rolling, just live, like that's an extreme example, but maybe too much of like just live rolling days versus actual skill development and technique development.
This is just a balance of everything.
So like everybody I know that like is exceptional, and like particularly people that got exceptional in like a short amount of time, like it seems that like what they do is they study, like they watch a lot of film, they watch YouTube videos about jiu-jitsu in their free time, they watch technique videos, and they focus on like the learning of it.
I mean, with the US, I mean, it's got a great, gigantic wrestling culture. In terms of learning from, like, do you think there's distinct differences between they coach wrestling and the way they coach jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, what's the difference? I've always wanted to know.
I think there's this like kind of old school tough guy mentality in wrestling that like more is more. Like we're just gonna work the hardest, and it's like, well, I think we kind of see that like just work for work's sake doesn't always pan out, right? So like we're gonna do 100 push-ups and run 40 sprints the night before a wrestling tournament just to show how much harder we work. Well, then then everyone's too tired to walk upstairs, but you expect them to like compete well. Like I think there's a lot of stuff like that in wrestling. And I also think like just the nature of interscholastic wrestling versus jiu-jitsu for adults that are doing it for a hobby is very different. Like, so like a wrestling season is 3 months. So 3 or 4 months, right? So a wrestler, it's like, if you say they're a senior in high school, they're like, I have these 3 months for the rest of my, then the rest of my life, right? So it's like a very short horizon, like that's not very far away. So it's like, if somebody wants to be a champion or a state medalist or whatever, it's like they have this very short window of time to accomplish that. So it's like, it's a sprint versus the marathon, right? So they tear their ACL or something, like there is no time off. Like if you take that time off, then this ship has sailed for the rest of your life. So people push through a lot more stuff. I also think it's just more of like an aggressive like environment. Like people take pride in making even like their own teammates quit, right? Or like getting on fights on the mat or just generally causing distress. And you can't do that in jiu-jitsu with paying adults. Jiu-jitsu is the marathon versus the sprint. It's like, I hope to be doing jiu-jitsu for the next 40 years. So if I do pop that rib or tear that muscle in my neck, it's like, if I take those 2-3 weeks off to recover, then it's not the worst thing ever, you know?
Jiu-jitsu is the marathon. So I keep forgetting about seasons, especially with sports teams. It's kind of like the same, like MMA right now, there's no off seasons as well, right? But then when you see most of the seasons when it comes to wrestling, there's only 3 or 4 months out. So out of those 8 and 9 months out of season, is it just training?
Yeah, I think the load is reduced a little bit. Like people do it fewer times per week and focus more on like technique development versus like live goes and stuff.
Right. Have you ever experienced any kind of like different style of kind of like wrestling learning, for example? Like obviously there's the USA methodology, right? It's the same with kind of weightlifting. There's like the Bulgarian method, there's the American method, or the international method. Is there like a different method when it comes to like Russia or China or Japan that you've experienced?
Like just from observations, like, I don't have a bunch of insider knowledge, right? And I went to like smaller schools that weren't as competitive. But like from what I see, like the people that do play and do keep like a positive environment and like they appear to have the most success. Right? Like, so I think like the stark contrast you see, and I'm certainly not an expert on this, but like there's like the Iowa style, which is like grind, like, and like the brands want their wrestlers like basically under constant stress. It's kind of like pressure turns you into diamonds type of deal. And then you see Penn State, where I think they have a little bit more of like a fun atmosphere, and it's not quite so distressing. And they have a lot of success. I think they've won like 8 out of the 10 last national tournaments.
Iowa State, that's where Dan Gable coached for years, right?
Iowa.
Yeah, I remember reading a couple of his books, and he was like, I think once he retired, there's a photo of him coaching his athletes, and it was just after he had a double hip replacement surgery, and he was only in like his maybe like early 40s, and I was just like, how do you wreck your body to that extent? And when you hear him talking about podcasts later on, he talks about how the one thing that he kind of regrets when it came to the training was like, they said water's for pussies or water's for weak people. So they wouldn't hydrate during training, but he just realizes if he was hydrating, probably his performance and his output would have been better.
Yeah, definitely. Or like there's stories of him at like he couldn't sleep at night because he was so wary of the fact that somebody might be training harder than him. So rather than sleep, he would go get on his rowing machine or whatever and do more reps rather than recover. But I think one thing about that is just like information wasn't as readily available. Like we've talked about this before, like how we're one generation away from people that like had no idea about nutrition or exercise science. And it's like, basically you hear something from somebody that sounds smart and you just take that for gospel and then do that. Like, oh, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. All right, got it. Or like,
that's true.
Avoid fats. Okay, got it. And it's like somebody says, water makes you weak. And they're like, all right, don't need water. Or, oh, I should be training instead of sleeping.
That's true. So another question I wanted to ask is, which country do you think is like the fastest growing in terms of grappling in Asia right now?
I imagine China.
Oh, yeah, I kind of agree with you on that one.
Just because of the sheer scale, like the amount of population they have and the economy that's just, it's boomed and continues to do so. Like I think it's just gonna grow bigger and bigger in China.
Especially guys like Joseph Chen, who's like half, well, he's Eurasian, or is he American?
I think he's like Taiwanese and South African, maybe.
It's a good combination though, because like he can speak Chinese really well, right? Well, he's obviously a native. Man, that guy's going to be like a superstar in the future in China, especially. You can imagine how much Japan he's got to teach in those places.
Yeah, I think he'll be a household name in jiu-jitsu.
So, okay, so you see China as like one of the fastest growing places in terms of like atmosphere, culture, where you've trained so far. Where's been your favorite country, would you say?
Probably Thailand. Yeah. Like, I just like how there's, like, Phuket in particular has a really nice, like, martial arts culture, right? Obviously started with the Muay Thai, and then MMA, like a tiger,
exploded,
and then all these MMA gyms pouring in, so more high-level athletes pouring in. Like, just the pool of like training partners there, and just places to train. Yeah.
Have you trained everywhere there, or like?
I have not trained everywhere, but I've been to most places at least once.
Yeah. It seems like Phuket Grappling Academy is just like probably going to be the one that's going to be dominating for future competitions, especially in nogi.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that Phuket Grappling Academy is probably the best gym in this whole hemisphere.
Yeah. But it's only like a no-gi program there. I mean, it's like purely grappling based, right?
Yeah, it's all no-gi. There's 3 no-gi classes per day, Monday through Friday. And then Saturday, we have a huge open mat.
Yeah. So what made you move from that? Because, I mean, you're down in Phuket for roughly a year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I needed a little change of scenery. Like, I just, not in jiu-jitsu per se, but
Just everything
like
outside of
I've
it.
got some other things I need to be developing. Like I need to be working on my business more, and I need to like think about the future a little bit as I'm getting older. So I wanted to take a break from the island life and just be somewhere where a little more stimulating for a bit.
Yeah.
Just like a change of scenery, right?
Yeah.
Like, go to the city for a little bit. It'll probably make me appreciate the island a little more and just.
How do you find Bangkok so far?
I like Bangkok. It is a little busy. Like some days I feel like I just have to camp out in my apartment and like kind of escape from it. But it's really nice. Like there's a cool jiu-jitsu scene. Like I'm a big fan of Arete and Fight Lab. And I've made some good friends here. Nice food, nice places to relax, nice nightlife. It's a good place.
You've got your own brands plural, which is pretty awesome. But just I heard recently that well, you told me recently because I was just interested that you were going to start being like an ambassador, one of the guys that are selling in Southeast Asia for a brand called Half Sumo Collective. They're a Brooklyn-based brand, right?
Yeah. So they're based out of New York. They're very big in the United States. Half Sumo. So I'll be helping them set up Half Sumo Thailand and hopefully eventually going into the rest of Southeast Asia.
How did that come about?
So I was a fan of Half Sumo, so I've followed them for a long time, and I just think they have a really cool, like kind of like story around the brand. So it's 2 Italian guys. One of them is named Alberto, and so he was like he was the original owner of Manto and had a hand in a lot of other like large jiu-jitsu brands like BJJ HQ, and I think he did some stuff with like Scramble USA. And then there's another guy named Luigi who's actually like a champion Kyokushin karate fighter.
Oh, really?
And he's like a really good artist, and they have some cool content about how they make their designs and stuff like that. And so I was a fan, and I just kind of cold reached out to them, and I said, like, hey, you guys, you have some fans out here.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really cool if you had a presence here in Southeast Asia. You know, martial arts are booming, particularly here in Thailand.
Yeah.
And I think there'd be a space for it. And they got back to me. We had a Zoom meeting, and then they happened to be going out to Japan at the same time that I had actually been considering going, because I had a friend that was going to be fighting out there.
Oh.
And I was turning 30, and I'd always wanted to check Japan off my list. So I'd been thinking about like going there as like my own little present to myself. And so it just kind of perfectly coincided when they were going to be there. So we went out there, met with them, and it went well. So we're still ironing out some of the details, but it does sound like Half Sumo will be coming to Thailand.
Yeah. So where'd you go in Japan?
I went to Tokyo and Osaka and Kyoto.
Yeah. Which city did you like the most?
Which did I like the most? I thought Kyoto was really cool. Like lots of cool temples and like kind of nature and everything. Just like the aesthetics of it was really cool in Kyoto.
So did you meet the Half Sumo guys in Tokyo, was it?
Yeah. Met in
Oh,
Tokyo.
that's awesome. So the future plan is to kind of like be part of Half Sumo Collective for Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, like in terms of branding and like getting product in Asia, manufacturing is in China, but at the same time, like trying to get stuff into Asian countries, it's been a bit of a struggle. But you mostly distribute in the USA, right?
Yeah, I mostly distribute in the US. Yeah.
You don't want to get
It
any.
can be a struggle just going through customs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there are ways around it, right? If you have like a good shipping agent, they can take care of stuff.
Yeah. You don't want to bring any Iron BJJ stuff to Thailand.
I think there are iron things that I probably could.
Yeah.
I think like the other stuff that's like very American and like kind of political in
US,
nature,
yeah.
it's probably just not the market for it.
Awesome. Yeah. So what are the future plans then?
Future plans, just keep scaling my own business. Hopefully help them launch Half Sumo out here and get that thriving in the region. And just train jiu-jitsu every day, continue my skill development in that, and just enjoy myself.
And lastly, is there anybody that you'd like to thank?
Oh man, I'd like to thank a lot of people. What am I thanking them for?
Just your journey so far, going from having a 6-figure job to like finding kind of like your passion in Asia, like the people that you've met.
Yeah, I thank my parents, right? Doing stuff that other people might think was risky, like they always kind of supported me. Like they just, as long as I'm happy, they're happy. So them always being in my corner. Thank Ben at Phuket Grappling Academy. I spent like the last year there, and I probably developed more in that year than the 4 or 5 years, whatever, prior. Like,
yeah.
Thank you guys for bringing me on to coach for you.
It's awesome, man. Let's
also, shout out to my boys, Logan and Taylor Griffin, and Bristol Jiu-Jitsu back in Bristol, Tennessee. Bristol, Virginia, sorry. Whenever I go home, they take good care of me, let me train there. They're a big supporter of their brand, or of my brand, and I owe them a lot.